I believe the hardest thing to deal with when you're going through struggles with your mental illness is the feeling of being alone. I don't know how many of you have ever felt like nobody could understand you. Nobody knew what you were going through. Nobody could feel the depth of pain that you were feeling. I know I've felt that way many times. But I can remember early on, before I really knew what mental illness was, or before I recognized it as something I had, it was an even stronger feeling of loneliness. Mine started, I guess, when I was probably 9 years old. I can remember becoming obsessed with the idea of death and the idea that I was going to die. And the fear kept me awake at night. You know, as a 9-year-old child, you shouldn't be having these intrusive thoughts about dying. Most 9-year-olds don't think about dying every second of the day. Well, it had gotten to a point with me that that's how I was feeling every day, you know, and I would pray and I would try to reason it out in my head, but I couldn't. It was just there. And I felt so alone. You know, at one point I even tried to talk to my parents, but this was 1985, 86. I mean, mental health awareness is bad today. Imagine what it was like in the 80s and the 70s. And so for me, it just kind of got pushed to the side. It kind of, my mom and dad were like, "Oh, well, you're fine. Don't worry about that. You know, just don't worry about it." Well, it's kind of hard when you have obsessive compulsive disorder not to worry about something. So that feeling of aloneness is what I want to kind of talk about just a tiny bit today. Because if you feel completely alone, then you put yourself in a really dangerous position, because it can lead really to despair. It can lead you to be isolated from others around you. And we really gain a lot of strength when we know that other people are dealing with what we're dealing with. And that's really why I've decided to kind of put myself out there, was because I want you to know that you're not alone, that there are folks out there just like you that deal with this. You know, so I got really thinking about how to approach this, and I thought about all the historical figures, that we know and that, are just common knowledge of who these people's names are. Most people know them. And I wanted to look at, what kind of things did they deal with, because a lot of great people in our world have dealt with a lot of mental illness. And so I started going through and just looking at some of these things and some of these different historical characters or historical figures. And the first one that came up was Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln suffered from depression, suicidal thoughts. They called it melancholy back then. We see cars riding around, these Tesla cars, but Tesla actually suffered from severe OCD. Then we have Vincent van Gogh. We kind of all know he was a little off. He cut his ear off, but he had, a lot of personality disorders. Mozart, they believe that he had Tourette's. Darwin had a panic disorder and agoraphobia. Michelangelo, they say he had OCD and possibly Asperger's syndrome. Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol, all those great, A Tale of Two Cities, great author, bipolar, depression. Beethoven, they say he was bipolar. Winston Churchill, who called his depression the black dog of depression. And he's one of the strongest historical figures or most courageous historical figures of our modern era. He was bipolar. He suffered from suicidal thoughts. Ernest Hemingway, the writer of The Old Man and the Sea, again, another guy who suffered with bipolar. And they also say that he had some narcissism mixed in there and a lot of depression. And Virginia Woolf, the great female author, she was bipolar. So you go through all these historical figures and you see that they had so many great things that they did in their life, and yet they still struggle with mental illness. So I encourage you to look at that and see that as a positive. You can overcome it and you can make a difference in this world, because that's what we're really put here for. And being a Christian and a former minister, I look at the Bible as some of the characters in the Bible. You look at them and you're like, oh, well, they were maybe perfect or whatever, and you think that, but they really weren't. Because if you really look at some of the things that the Bible talks about, they're characters in the Bible who we can really see some mental problems in the things they say and the things they do and what they write. Like King David, who wrote all the Psalms. This is what he said: my guilt has overtaken me, like a burden too heavy to bear. That's his own words. Elijah, the great prophet: I've had enough, take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. Jonah, he prayed, now Lord, take away my life, for it's better for me to die than to live. Job, who we all know went through all kinds of torture, all kinds of things that God allowed to happen to him, he said the same thing. Why did I not perish at my birth? And why didn't I die when I came out of the womb? Jeremiah, another prophet, he said, cursed be the day I was born. Now that's pretty heavy there, if you're cursing the day you were born. And then we go into the New Testament, when we look at Paul. Paul says that he was given a thorn in his flesh, or a messenger from Satan to torment me. Now, we don't know exactly what that is, but you see that, and it's like there's something there that's tormenting him, a messenger from Satan. Seems to me that, OCD is a tormentor. A lot of mental illnesses torment you. And, that is what I think could have possibly been that messenger from Satan. And even if you go all the way to Jesus, when Jesus goes into the garden to pray before he's going to be crucified, he's asked, like, his disciples, he's saying to them, he's like, hey, guys, I need you to pray for me. And this is what he says: my soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. So if we look at all those things, and we look at all those characters, all the way from Abraham Lincoln to Jesus, King David, all of these biblical and historical figures, we see that they struggle just like we do. So we're not actually alone in our struggles. We can look back in history and we can see how people have successfully managed mental illness. And the great thing nowadays is that we're able to identify it better. We're able to have some medications that will help us survive. I take my medication every day. I realize, just like if I had high blood pressure, which I do have high blood pressure, if I take my blood pressure medicine, my blood pressure is good. Diabetics, they take medicine. Every other person takes medicine for the things they deal with, and it's no different with your mind. If you have a broken brain, like I like to call it, I have a broken brain, well, that medication that I take helps me, it doesn't cure me, but it helps me to manage my disease and what I go through every day. Just to close out today, I wanted to share a song with you by one of my favorite musicians. Being a musician myself, I really listen to the words of all these songs when people write songs. And James Taylor has always, from my early childhood, been one of my favorite writers. He's a great songwriter. But I think where his writing skills come from is the fact that he struggled with a lot of different challenges in life. And he struggled with mental illness. If you look back at his life, in 1965, as a senior in high school, he committed himself to an institution because he couldn't figure out what was going on. In 1967, he had a heroin addiction, which he was trying to kick. In 1969, he committed himself again to a mental institution to help him try to manage his heroin addiction and manage his mental illness. And it took him until 1983 until he finally overcame his substance abuse issues with methadone and heroin. And he finally started getting things together where he could manage things. And he says about this, when he's talking about his mental health struggles, he says, it is an inseparable part of my personality that I have these feelings. So what he was saying is, you know, he's gonna have these feelings. We're gonna have these feelings. However, even though we can't separate ourselves from them, we can be successful, and we're not alone. And that's the key. I don't want you to feel like you're alone. I want you to feel like that you have people that understand you, that you have other, you know, really it's millions of other people who understand what you're going through. And you just need to, if you're really going through something, you're on your, you know, the end of your rope, as would say, or whatever, that you would come and find somebody that you can talk to. And I hope this encourages you today. And one of my favorite songs James Taylor wrote was Fire and Rain. And I just want to do that for you today because it's a song that's always spoken to me. Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. Suzanne, the plans they made put an end to you. I walked out this morning and I wrote down this song. I just can't remember who to send it to. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see gotta help me make a stand. You just gotta see me through another day. My body's aching and my time's at hand. I won't make it any other way. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again. Been walking my mind to an easy town, back turned towards the sun. Lord knows when the cold wind blows, it'll turn your head around. Well, there's all the time on that telephone line, talk about things to come, sweet dreams and flying machines, pieces on the ground. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see it, baby, one more time again now. But I'd see you one more time again. There's just a few things coming my way this time around now. Thought I'd see you, fire and rain.